Hello, test 1, 2, 1, 2.
Phil Gray to the podium. Phil Gray to the podium. Welcome, everybody, to the Rotary Club of Lexington's September 5th, 2004 meeting. Here for the pledge, four-way test, and inspiration, Mr. Phil Gray.
Thanks, sir. Do the pledge first. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And the four-way test, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Please be seated. Football season is here again. Go. Cats are off to a good start. Big game this weekend against South Carolina. But to me, the most inspirational events this summer occurred in Paris, France, in the 2024 Olympic Games, where athletes from the University of Kentucky shone bright. Kentucky had 11 athletes and one UK med student compete for the United States Olympic team. 8 of those athletes were women. In fencing on day 2, Lexington native and UK medical student Lee Kiefer defended her 2020 individual foal gold. She became the first US woman ever to win 2 Olympic gold medals in individual foil. Sydney McLaughlin-Laverne, the greatest track star, men or women in the world, won the gold in the 400-meter hurdles with a world record-setting time, 50.37 seconds, defending her gold medal from the Tokyo Games. She is the first woman to ever win gold twice in the 400-meter hurdles. She will be inducted into the UK Hall of Fame this month. Obviously, I'm bothering him. Daniel Roberts secured silver in the men's 110-meter hurdles at the time of 13:09. Macia Russell, Jasmine Camacho Quinn, and Devon Carlton made up 37.5% of the entire 100 hurdles Olympic final. Russell, in her Olympic debut, won the gold medal by 1/100th of a second. Defending champ in the event from 2021, Jasmine Camacho Quinn took home the bronze. She will also be inducted into the UK Hall of Fame this month. Sydney McLaughlin-Lavorny again and Alexa Holmes helped lead the U.S. Team to its 8th consecutive gold medal in the 4x400 relay, and they broke a 36-year-old American record in the event. Sydney captured her 2nd gold medal in this year's games and her 4th gold medal overall. Meanwhile, Holmes claimed her 1st Olympic gold medal. Women's basketball, 2022 WNBA #1 pick Ryan Howard earned a bronze medal in the women's 3x3. Men's basketball, Anthony Davis, Devin Booker, and Bam Adebayo helped defeat France in the gold medal game, leading the team to its 5th consecutive gold medal. And in volleyball, 2020 NCAA tournament champion Avery Skinner snagged a silver for Team USA volleyball in the gold medal game against Italy. Great effort by these cats.
Thanks, Phil. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Introduction of guests. Michelle Ripley.
I'm delighted to welcome our visitors today, starting with a gold medalist himself, Rob Bromley, a very familiar face on TV. Thanks for joining us, Rob. And he's the guest of our very own gold medalist, Mr. Millward. 68 years with us, right? Also want to welcome Brian Martin and Richard Gibbons. They're both guests of Trey McCauley. We welcome Pierce. We want to welcome Pierce Christie. Where's Pierce? There we are. Guest of. We're glad you're here. Oh, great. Alicia. We also thank Cindy Sparks, guest of Jenny Shore, Shannon Foster, guest of Chris Henry, and David Brian Blondell, guest of Reverend David Blondell. Thank you to all of our guests, and we hope you'll join us again. But Mr. President, if I could take a moment of privilege here. If anybody's been tuning in to watch KET this past year, you've probably seen a lot of familiar faces. Who has been seeing their Rotarians during the KET Pledge Drive? We want to, yay, a lot of you. We want to thank Alicia for organizing a great team of volunteers, including Chris Anderson, Chris Aldridge, Brad Blaine, Bill Bird, Rhodes Smith, Marcus Cross, Eileen O'Brien, Wynn Stevens, and what a great interview he did. Where's Wynn? I saw him earlier. Yay, Wynn. You all can see the video over and over and over again on the website. And Susie Basham, Judy Worth, Bill Cox, and Susan Adams. So thank you. Fellow Rotarians. You can watch them if you haven't seen them coming up on the Carole King, James Taylor special, Saturday at 4 o'clock, Sunday at 8 o'clock. That's the beauty. You get multiple days of exposure when you volunteer with KET. Or on the Rogers and Hammerstein special, which is Saturday at noon or Sunday at 4 o'clock. And our Rotary team has helped raise the most money for KET than any other group this drive. So about $8,200. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Michelle, and thanks to the Rotary team and their great fundraising efforts. We're going to do the lottery a little bit different. I'd like to have a advertiser in the wheel horse. So I'm gonna pick Scott Neal. Will you go ahead and Bruce pick 2 names out of there? We've got about 6 spots left in the wheel horse. And it's just $350 to get your name in here. Bruce, pick 2 and then read the numbers, the last 4 digits, if you would.
The first one up, gotta be able to see it, 5306. 5306.
You got one, read the other.
All right. Second number is 5376. 5376.
Thank
Do we have number 2?
Yeah. Oh, close, got an ace. We're looking for the ace of clubs. What's the total at right now? 1987. Thanks for playing, Mike. Was there another one? Did somebody get the other number?
5376. Going
And
once.
Going once.
Going twice.
Going twice.
Look at your number. All right.
Wait,
But-
yes?
Hey, Peggy.
1987. Oh, another ace. That's it? We've got a winner? We've got a winner. The ace of clubs. How about that? Congratulations, Peggy. Peggy, may that help you this weekend in your triathlon on Sunday. Peggy and I are doing the Try for Sight triathlon. You were walking a little slow, saving the energy for this Sunday. Way to go, Peggy Trafton. Celebrating birthdays today, Mike Holligan, and we've got a very special birthday today, Dave Blondell. Dave Blondell, you've been a Rotarian since 1970. That's 54 years. And yesterday, you are 90 plus 1, 90 years old. I'd like to do the last line in happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Announcements. We had an amazing turnout at the Pollinator Garden last Thursday, the 5th Thursday. Boy, it was amazing. And if you haven't been out there, there's going to be a lot more times to check it out. It's an amazing thing for the community. This weekend is the Toyota Bluegrass Miracle League from 10 to 2 at Shillato Park. We're hosting opening day. I'm going to try and make that first pitch count. If you haven't been, it is an amazing, amazing event. And those kids, I was a buddy last year and I played in the field and I had a buddy for all the games, and it's an amazing experience. I highly recommend it. Sunday, I mentioned we're doing the triathlon and it's going to start at 7:45 in the morning. It's going to be really cold. 400-meter swim, a 12-mile bike ride, and a 5K. Wish me and Peggy luck. And then next Saturday, September 15th, we have RLI, Rotary Leadership Institute, Part 1, 2, and 3 presented concurrently. And that's at the Public Library East Branch from 9:30 to 4:30, and it's free. Please sign up. It's amazing leadership insights and training. And then Susan, if you would like to talk about what's coming up on September 28th, we've got a away game, but we're going to make it a lot of fun. Susan Adams.
Thank you, Brett. So we want everybody to join us, and you can become a potential winner just like Peggy has been. So this is an away game, as Brett said, meaning that you're not going to have to worry about not going to Commonwealth Stadium that day. You're going to go instead to Susie and Kenny Basham's home, and they will be set up for a tailgating, game watching party, indoors or out, depending on weather. They're going to have a meal that we hope that everybody will participate in. We're going to have pulled pork, and then everybody bring a side dish, and we will have football bingo out there every week. Even if you can't go, you can help. This is for tailgating for Town Branch. So the money raised is going to go to the Rotary commitment for Town Branch. And you can buy a square out front that as the game proceeds and the scores go on, you can potentially be a winner. It doesn't matter which square you pick. But for $10 for every square you pick, you have a chance to win, even if you can't be there. And we'll have that out front every week. And then we'll have football bingo going on during the game for more chances to win. So we hope everyone can join us. On your table, you'll see a QR code where you can sign up. It's $25 per person to come to the tailgating. And that all goes to Town Branch. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Susie. Boy, we have some good stuff. You know, and Susie and I were talking, we need, you know, as being a big part of Dancing with the Lexington Stars for as long as I've been a Rotarian, and a lot of fundraising pressure was on that big event, and we needed another couple events. And we came up with the idea of Pickle and Pints, a pickleball tournament. And it's gonna be fun and it's gonna happen. And I believe we have a date, January 25th. So the NFL championship weekend, and then there's an off week, and then the Super Bowl. We're in that off week, and a lot of details to be known, but for anybody that wants to get involved and help be a part of that committee and raise money, Pickles and Pints, January 25th. Also, an email went out to yearlings and new members to do another initiative for fundraising, and it's leaning into our international interests. And other Rotary clubs do an international dinner, and we're gonna do one here in Lexington. We're targeting November 8th, Friday, November 8th at Gray Line. So if you have an interest to, or any connections, we want all 7 continents food and drink to be represented. I think I'm gonna do Kona ice for Antarctica, but other than that, it's wide open. If you have insights into any of the other continents, restaurants, and people, it's gonna be a lot of fun. We're gonna have an informational next week, and if you have interest but can't attend next week, see me after the event. See me after today's meeting. We're gonna do a 6-week membership drive. Of all the fundraising that we do, the most important thing that we can do is drive membership. And so for the next 6 weeks, starting today, I'm challenging everyone to bring in not just a guest, but a new member in the next 6 weeks. We want our club numbers to go up and grow, and it's gonna take a lot of pressure off the fundraising, and a bigger club means more people to do more things and give more back to the community. We're gonna do a membership drive starting today. Everyone, I challenge you, bring in a new member in the next 6 weeks. Raise your hand if you're not interested to do that. I don't see a hand up. I see everybody is interested to do that. Let's grow the membership of the best Rotary Club in the world. Let's go. And then last but not least, one of my goals was to get a sponsor of the roster. It's a big expense, about $2,500. And so I went to a few people who I believed it would be a good fit for, and we have a sponsor. And that's gonna come out. And that's going to come out the end of September or early October. And I'd like to thank DG with Aging with Grace as the sponsor of the roster. Thank you very much. If you have a loved one who needs a little help at home, or maybe diagnosed with cognitive decline and would like to help them benefit from spending time with others and getting help and living their best life in that chapter, I encourage you to engage Aging with Grace. Thank you so much, DG. And with that, I'd like to bring, just a minute after my goal, Susie to the podium to introduce our featured guest. Oh, and come on up, Susie. You know what? As a president, I get to nominate members. Honorary members of Rotary. And there's an individual standing right behind me who is a big part of our Rotary Club meetings every week. Tom, thank you so much. You are officially an honorary member of Rotary.
Thank you.
And here's Brad.
Now,
Thank you very much. Tom Evans, everyone. Thank you. Lucy Basil, everyone.
In case any of you don't know, Tom Evans is the one that manages this area and helps all of us here. And we are very appreciative for Main on Main doing that. So I get the distinct honor of introducing our guest, Richard Gibbons. You could read all the bio stuff in there. I'm not going to read all that stuff. But I will tell you a little bit about him. He is the CEO of Bluegrass Realtors. So he's basically our Peggy Trafton. He's on staff and corrals and helps 4,000 members of the Bluegrass Realtors board. And also the Imagine MLS, which he's going to talk about a little bit. And he's been very instrumental coming in and really taking us through a transition in the real estate world. I'm sure you all heard about it. And he's going to talk about it. But on the personal note, he was really excited to move to Kentucky because he likes to get outdoors. He has a 4-year-old little girl. And they've been going around. He told me he's done Natural Bridge twice, Lake Barkley. I've been here like 6 weeks. Natural Bridge twice, Lake Barkley. He's been a couple other places. I told him some places to go. I also found out he's a big Lego nerd. So we were talking about Legos, but it fits because he's got 4,000 pieces to put together in our board. And now he's putting 4,000 pieces of Legos. So he's used to it. So we're really excited to have you, Richard. Please come to the stand. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie. And yeah, I do have about 250,000 Lego bricks, roughly. So good afternoon, everyone. And, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Richard Gibbons, and as Susie said, I'm the CEO of Bluegrass Realtors. Now, I'm not a realtor myself, and I don't sell homes. But I lead the local realtor association. The clicker's not working. Am I hitting the right button? The next slide is just my face anyway, so I'll keep going. So we serve about 4,400 realtors across 38 counties in central Kentucky, stretching from Fayette and surrounding counties all the way down south to the Tennessee border. We work diligently to preserve and enhance private property rights and provide the technology and the multiple listing service that make buying and selling possible every single day. Now, I do have a great slide for this, but I'm just keep going. Though I have not been a member of a Rotary Club, I am among the many non-members who have worked alongside Rotary members and have seen firsthand what this organization can mean to a community. Through that, I've also long been familiar with the 4-way test, and I find it a beneficial framework to pass business and life decisions through. So I was asked to speak on the changes happening in the real estate industry right now that's been in the news. So I found it fitting with this group that we apply the 4-way test to the NAR settlement. So we'll start with what is always the toughest question. There we go. So there's the great slide about the 4-way test. We'll start with what's always the toughest question. Is it the truth? As you've all undoubtedly learned as you apply this test in your lives, the question often sets up answers to the following 3 questions. There's a reason it's the first one after all. I wanted to debunk a few misconceptions around the settlement that will set us up for other things I'll discuss more in a little more detail later. Unfortunately, there's quite a few misconceptions spiraling around the settlement. Fed largely by the mainstream media. We've seen headlines and comments like these in many media outlets, and I'd like to take a moment to address a few of them. First, NAR does not set commissions, and they continue to be negotiable. There is no standard set by law, policy, or otherwise. In fact, the 6% number that the media loves to talk about isn't even really true. The average has actually been closer to 5% for quite some time. Second, the settlement does not establish any new standard or limitation on what a realtor can charge. Realtors are each independent business owners and are able to set their own prices based on the services they provide, just as many of you in this room do every single day. Parts of the settlement change how a realtor is paid, and I'll talk about that. But if a realtor is paid is not changed by the settlement. Along those same lines, there's never been an obligation for a seller to pay a buyer broker agent or buyer agent compensation. Offering a commission as low as $0 has been an option for quite some time, though few opted to take advantage of that because it's mutually beneficial for both sides to have professional representation in this to ensure a smooth process. Finally, one of my favorite misconceptions is that realtor commissions have artificially inflated home prices. Even if we are using the 6% number touted by the media, that still falls far short of the 47% increase in median sale price since 2020, or I'm sorry, since 2020. Home prices are driven by supply and demand. Demand is high because of generational trends and the impact of COVID on how we live our lives. And inventory is low because of the lost decade of new home building, and sellers are unwilling to sell because they're locked into historically low interest rates. I myself have a home back in Albuquerque with a 2.5% interest rate that they can pry from my cold dead hands. So I'm right there with it. So this combination of low supply and high demand is what drives home prices higher, not realtor commissions. So what did actually change? Like most settlements, of course, there's a denial of liability or denial of wrongdoing, release of liability, no surprise there, right? That's every settlement. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. However, do know that we do firmly believe in the value of cooperative compensation, especially to first-time home buyers. And there are many things that NAR has advocated for to change to protect those buyers in relation to this lawsuit. I'll also talk about later. Like I said, talking about the truth sets up a lot of things. The two big things that actually did change is that there is now a rule prohibiting offers of compensation in the multiple listing service, and all realtors working with buyers are required to enter into a written agreement. Each of these will also be to make more sense when I explain them a bit later. But the bottom line of the truth is this: compensation continues to be negotiable, as it always should be. The changes do provide more transparency to the consumer and provide more avenues for compensation than were previously available. Which brings us to the next question. Is it fair to all concerned? I believe it is. Through this settlement, how realtors are compensated, it will be more transparent to the consumer. While this does add an additional layer of complexity, more paperwork, and more conversations to the home buyer process, I believe in the long run, this will end up being better for everyone. To explain that, let me break down the difference in how compensation was paid pre and post settlement, partially so you guys can kind of understand it, but also so you can see where the benefit is to the consumer. So previously, the seller and the listing broker would sign a listing agreement, and within that agreement, the listing broker would capture the total amount of compensation to be paid during the deal. They would then share part of that compensation with the buyer broker through the multiple listing service. This method of cooperative compensation was actually started all the way back in the late 1800s and has served real estate extremely well for over 100 years because it made the process simpler for everyone and ensured that buyers would have professional representation. One drawback of that system, however, is that, as you can see in this diagram, there's really only one contract guiding the conversation. So here on this one, there were rules in place that guided cooperative compensation, the broker-to-broker relationship over here on the right side. So those are rules in the MLS, and they did guide that. It wasn't just willy-nilly, and that was actually what came under attack in this settlement. As noted by the orange boxes, often the relationship between the buyer and the buyer broker was also assumed rather than well documented. And that assumption was driven by state regulatory broker duties. So that's done by in our case, the Kentucky Real Estate Commission. Now, this is a good place to stop for just a moment and point out that realtors also abide by a code of ethics that holds their actions and responsibilities in a higher regard than what is simply required by law. So that did still oversee and protect everyone in this process, pre and post settlement. The code of ethics is still there. Code of ethics is still in place. But then in the old process, when the buyer brought a purchase agreement to the seller, compensation had already been worked out. And it was not something that must be dealt with during the negotiation process. The buyer and seller could simply focus on negotiating the property and the purchase price. Now, that being said, even in the old model, compensation still was often brought up and negotiated. It was available to be done, and it was done quite often. Now, before I dig into the new way, I want to make a point here real quickly. Realtors did not ask for this change. These changes are a result of a lawsuit brought against realtors that challenged the previous model I just showed you. There are definite benefits to the consumer in the new model. I want to be very clear about that, and I'm going to explain what those are. But there's also more complexity, and the entire system will be slightly less efficient as a result. As I'll explain a little later, I do think the long-term benefits will outweigh the costs, but please know this is not anyone trying to make your life harder. So starting back on August 17th, things will now look a little different. The seller has a listing agreement with the listing broker that agrees to pay their commission. That has not changed. But now the buyer will also have an agreement with the buyer broker, setting the services that will be provided and the amount that will be paid. This is where the transparency in the process comes in, because now the buyer is more fully aware of how much the buyer broker is being compensated. You'll also notice that that arrow over on the right side that was over here is gone. This is because the proactive offer of compensation from the listing broker to the buyer broker is no longer allowed to be advertised on the MLS. That's the rule that actually changed, is that they cannot proactively offer the compensation on the multiple listing service. Now, when the offer is presented on a purchase agreement, so now we're looking right here, a purchase agreement has now happened between the seller and the buyer. There's a few different things that can happen. But in all cases, it's fully documented in writing, so everyone is clear on exactly what has happened. So you can see between all four parties, there is a contract in place for every one of those. There is an asterisk on the contract between the listing and the buyer broker here, because that contract may or may not be necessary, depending on how that works out, such as if everyone agrees to pay their own representation, that contract's not necessary. However, let's return to the concern about first-time home buyers for a moment. When I purchased my first home, I did so with $400 in my bank account. I had a 0 down loan through the USDA, but without cooperative compensation, that $400 is not paying for professional representation. I would not have been able to afford my own, and then would have had to either rely on the services of the broker who represents the seller, not me, or I would have had to go the process alone. When this settlement came down, the possibility of harming that buyer was the first topic of conversation on the lips of every realtor who has helped someone through that process. Now, in this new model, there is still a vehicle to help that buyer, and that is in the offer to purchase. So through that offer, the buyer can request for the seller to pay the buyer broker's compensation, and it's treated essentially as a closing cost. Just like if the buyer is asking for a carpet allowance to make repairs, do point buy downs, or any other kind of concession, they can ask for the buyer broker's compensation to be covered. Now, depending on how the seller set up their listing agreement with the broker, there's a few different ways, but through negotiation, the bottom line is there's now multiple avenues for all this to be accomplished. And that makes this about consumer transparency and choice. So it did also introduce some additional complexity and paperwork. Like, I don't expect anybody in this room to remember anything I just said in the last 2 minutes. But thankfully, you do still have your favorite realtor to help you guide you through that process. That's what they're there for. So now that I've bored you to death on details, let's go to the third question. Will it build goodwill and better friendships? This somewhat ties in with the last question, because goodwill and friendships are often built on trust. And your local realtors build that trust by helping consumers navigate what is often the most expensive and complex transaction of their life. But all of this means that realtors will need to communicate their value proposition and provide consumers with the information necessary to make informed decisions on the services they're paying for, which makes things more transparent and builds that goodwill with their clients. And realtors also, like a Rotary Club, view ourselves as a service organization, and we build goodwill in our communities every day. We are community advocates, working in and around our communities to support initiatives that make neighborhoods a better place to live, work, and play. We are involved in economic development discussions and engaged at local, state, and national level to support bipartisan candidates that advocate for private property rights and home ownership. And these are not stock photos up here. These are realtor members helping build ramps for seniors to access their homes through our Realtor Community Housing Foundation. We built over 36 ramps last year through that foundation and are on track to surpass that number this year. And these are just a few of our other press releases. Look, went the wrong direction. Too far. Back up. There it is. These are just a few of our other press releases, serving the community through scholarships, grants, donations, various charities. You see these efforts are building goodwill across all of our 38 counties. Did you know that 69% of realtors volunteer at least once a month for an average of 8 hours? This puts our volunteer rate of a realtor at literally 3 times more than the average American. Giving back is a part of who we are and what we do. Realtors are hardworking professionals and small business owners, just like many of you in this room, and they forge deep relationships with their clients. The home buying process is both complex and deeply personal. It would be hard not to create better friendships through that process. Which brings us to the final question. Will it be beneficial to all concerned? And I think it will. Truthfully, it may take a little while. As I explained earlier, more complexity has been added to an already complex process. Realtors, lenders, title companies, consumers are all trying to navigate a major shift in how things have been done for over 100 years. And it will take a little time to work out all the wrinkles. But when something's been done a certain way for that many years, there's some unintended consequences. There's some government policies. There's other considerations to work through. But there's already been some work done on that front. As I mentioned before, as soon as the settlement was announced, we were flooded with questions from realtor members. The 2 biggest question marks were, what about first-time home buyers and what about veterans? You see, as I mentioned earlier, first-time home buyers often cannot afford their own representation out of pocket, especially in low-income areas that see a lot of FHA loans, like Kentucky. The settlement brought up a lot of questions about how buyers could ask for broker's compensation to be paid, and NAR immediately got to work with Fannie Mae to seek clarification to the confusion. There's a lot of details related to something called interested party contributions I won't bore you with here, but suffice it to say that Fannie Mae issued clarification for everyone that made it clear that commissions do not count against those limits, which allows buyers to negotiate payment of their buyer broker's compensation as a closing cost or seller concession. Also, the Veterans Administration had rulemaking in place that fully prevented payment of compensation to the buyer's broker if it was not done through cooperative compensation. Meaning this settlement effectively locked veterans out of being able to utilize professional representation unless they were able to pay for it out of their pocket. NAR again immediately got to work meeting with the VA and other government officials to change this. And in June, the VA announced a temporary variance to the rule until more formal rulemaking could be completed. I'd like to stop here and point out for a second that the announcement of the settlement was March 15th. Fannie Mae made their announcement only 30 days later, and the VA announcement was only about 55 days later. Anybody ever got anything in government to move that quickly? Anyone? No? Okay, didn't think so. So, that's NAR going to work to make sure that people are able to get that professional buyer representation that they so need. But even beyond this immediate work, I think there'll be a lot of long-term benefits to all concerned as well. The first comes from innovation. Remember looking back at the old way, there was only one contract discussing compensation? There's an old saying about human nature that says, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. I saw this in my previous career in call centers. If you put a bonus on a certain metric, that metric would see improvement, often at the detriment of other metrics. But the premise is pretty simple. Where you put the incentive, human attention and behaviors will follow. If you look across the real estate industry on our side of the fence, the majority of products, training, books, coaches, technology, all the stuff has generally had a lot of focus on the listing side of the business because that's where the conversation about compensation was focused. But now that both sides are getting equal representation in the compensation discussion, I promise you there are rooms of nerds across the country developing the next great thing for the buying side of the business. This is going to drive innovation and growth in the real estate industry, and I believe it will be a net good. The second beneficial to all concerned is simply competition. Looking back to the new model, I briefly mentioned how there are many different ways for brokers to be compensated now. Those different avenues are going to open a lot of different possibilities and places for brokers to compete against each other on price and services. And I'm betting that on seeing many new business models come out of that. Competition is nearly always good for the consumer as it generally provides a wider range of choice. Now, at this point, some of you might be asking questions like, why does anyone need a realtor? We have Zillow. Or why does professional representation matter? To answer that, let me point you to a recent advertisement by Realtor.com. Don't worry, you're not meant to need to read this right now. But in it, they outline the 111 to-dos that happen during the home buying process. NAR has put out a similar list with 167 steps. Now, like I said, don't worry, you don't need to be able to read this. If you want to go on Realtor.com, you can if you're that interested. But the point is, the process to purchase a home is incredibly complicated. Over the years, realtors have done a tremendous job simplifying this process for customers to the point that some believe they are able to go it alone. But ask your favorite realtor, what happens when they end up in a transaction and the other side is unrepresented? And they will tell you they usually end up doing all of the work for both sides, or the unrepresented consumer discovers halfway through the process that what they're missing and they hire someone to represent them. Is that every time? Of course not. You know, I'm sure there's plenty of consumers who have the time and patience to handle all of that themselves. I can tell you that's not me. So for those of us who do need the help, you can just do one thing and hire a realtor. 89% of recent home buyers and sellers who were surveyed say they use a realtor again. And despite common beliefs, that number has steadily been increasing for nearly 2 decades. And beyond the complicated process, don't miss the fact that you want someone representing your interest in negotiations and contract discussions during the process, not the sellers. This is a real key component for home buyers who are navigating this for the first time and likely do not understand all the potential issues or things to look out for in home ownership. So I'll wrap up here by providing you with 2 resources. The QR code on the left gives you a 2-page PDF from NAR detailing what the settlement means for buyers. The QR code on the right is the same, but it focuses on sellers. Each gives a brief summary of many of the same points I made today. And, you know, I'll leave this up on the screen, but, you know, we did want to leave some time for Q&A. So I'm also available for any questions if anybody has them. But other than that, just thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Richard? Go ahead. Go ahead.
View of the sustainability of the price rise of homes, you mentioned.
Oh, yeah.
40-something%.
I don't think it's sustainable at all. It's something has to be done, but affordable housing is a tough problem. You know, it's you kind of have people on both sides of the fence. You have one side would love to build affordable housing, but then the other side is not in my backyard. You know, everybody wants affordable housing, they just don't want it here, right? So that's a tough problem to overcome. House prices are difficult, zoning and permitting are difficult. You know, when I was back in Albuquerque, I kind of made the joke about anybody being able to get the government to do something in 45 days. You can't even get a building permit in 45 days in Albuquerque. I don't know if it's that bad here. But permitting and zoning regulations are often really restrictive and are causing problems with home affordability. It's a big sticky wicket that there's not any one solution to. And then of the multiple solutions that do exist, it's hard to get people to agree on them. So I agree it's not sustainable. I would love to see it go the other direction, but I don't know how to accomplish it. Go ahead. Alicia. Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
From Zoom here, what's the effect of Zillow and Homes.com on realty business?
So I'm going to back up for a second and make sure everybody understands something for a moment, that Zillow and Homes.com both get their data from us. Like, we are the aggregator of data at the multiple listing service, and we provide the data to them. Now, they each have two different business models. One of them takes the leads and sells them to buyer brokers. The other one takes the leads and gives it directly to the listing agent and gets money in other ways. How they affect us? They're another service that consumers can use. They're not, I think a lot of times both of them are given a little more credence and power than they actually have. But as far as I'm concerned, they're just another business utilizing our data.
Last question.
Yeah.
What do you think the corporate buyers, is it Redfin?
Well, Redfin's a brokerage, but I think you're thinking of like BlackRock,
Yes.
corporate buyers, investment buyers. That's another one that there's a lot of consternation about it, but when you actually look at the data, they don't buy as much as you think they do. They really don't. Now, there are certain markets, ours is not one of them, where they are a little heavier. But they really are not causing as big of an issue as people think. They are a part of the problem, don't get me wrong, but they're not the big enemy. Yeah, so what she says is mainly Philly and New York, because they partner with BlackRock. So, but of course, that's where the media is, so that's what makes it blow up, right? That's the way that the New York market always kind of colors things.
No other questions? Let's give it up for Richard. Thank you, everybody. Richard, I'd like to give you a custom lithograph from our very own Bill Strauss. Thank you so much.
Thank you, appreciate it.
David Blondell, I'd like to pay your birthday money today for the birthday gift. And next week, I'm gonna be out of town, and Darby Turner is gonna be stepping in for me. And if anybody have any questions about the international dinner, I'm gonna be here for a few minutes. What a great day. Enjoy it. Thank you. We are adjourned.